So we got some big news out of the ATF today. Essentially, there are now 34 proposed and final rules that have now been introduced by the ATF. This is currently the ATF's attempt to kind of strengthen their pro-2A position and kind of align with the Trump executive order that he gave them to protect the Second Amendment. Now, these proposed and final rules include things like stabilizing brace rules being walked back, the machine gun definition being rewritten after the Supreme Court loss in the Cargill case, definition changes for who is engaged in the business of dealing firearms, major changes to the 4473 process, and also new rules on the NFA's transportation laws, mental health definitions, and a lot more also is included in these proposed and finalized ATF rules. Now, there's no way that I can cover everything that has happened today with these 34 rules. Plus, right now, we only have a summary of all these various proposals and finalized rules. As of filming this, I don't have the official language of everything, but I kind of wanted to highlight some of the main things and talk about some of the stuff that is now on the table. Now, before we jump into this video, if you want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to subscribe. You can also hit the like button. That just tells the algorithm that you appreciate this content, and so it shares it with more people. So let's start to break down some of the main highlights and some of the main points included in the 34 proposed and finalized rules by the ATF that they introduced today. So first, I want to talk about the stabilizing brace rule. That is one of the first things that they talked about. And they're talking about walking back and removing that language that was put in place by the Biden administration. The ATF is now proposing to remove the stabilizing brace rule from 2023, and they want to get rid of that entirely. Now, this section states that multiple federal courts have found that the 2023 rule violated the Administrative Procedures Act. This proposal removes regulating language that has been largely unenforceable. So this is a huge omission made by the ATF in this proposed rule. The brace rule is one of the most aggressive regulatory pushes by the ATF in history, and now it's been enjoined, stayed, or outright vacated across the country. And now the ATF in this language is essentially saying, we can't enforce this. Essentially, we can't do anything with this. So we're going to take it off the books. Now, how that will actually change their position in some of these still pending cases, like the one down in Texas, where they say that we can still regulate brace pistols as SBRs purely based on the NFA text, that's yet to be seen. But at least here they're saying that we're going to officially rescind the language of the brace rule from the NFA, and we're going to get rid of that. Next, another major reversal is tied directly to what the Supreme Court said in the critical win that we got in the Garland versus Cargill case. There, the ATF is saying that we're going to rewrite the definition of a machine gun based on what the Supreme Court said. So here's what they said in this language, or at least in the summary. They say that the ATF is removing definitions that previously incorporated bump stocks, aligning regulatory text with the statute and the court's binding legal interpretation. So the translation here really is that the ATF is undoing its bump stock kind of ban framework and the language there in direct response to what the Supreme Court said in the Cargill case. So again, that's good. Kind of like with the pistol brace rule, they're just saying we've lost in the courts on these various regulations and rules. And so now we're going to officially rescind this language. Now, the next thing involving kind of these rules and regulations is the engaged in business language. This one is kind of more subtle, but also very critical. The ATF is now rolling back parts of its expanded definition of who is engaged in the business of selling firearms. Now, their reasoning is that the changes have not produced the anticipated outcomes in licensing, enforcement, or forfeitures. And that's a big deal because they're admitting that the expansion of the language did not work. But they are also still keeping the statutory language from the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which in some ways isn't great, but that is the baseline language that was passed by Congress. And so that's what they're going back to. They're saying we're not going to expand beyond that, but we're going to go back to the baseline statutory language that was passed by Congress. So that's one of the ones that we're going to have to watch closely to see, how does that develop going forward, and what does this language actually say when we get the text. Now, a big section of changes really involves some paperwork and the 4473 changes, and this may directly impact you as well. Now, let's talk about something that kind of hits everybody, and that is that 4473 language. The ATF is proposing major updates to modernize that process. So kind of the biggest changes include things like streamlining the identity and residency verifications, increasing the time period for which the background checks remain valid, and then also permit electronic notice and digital record attachments. And there's also a lot of language, including your ability to perform this online and not have to maybe do it in person at an FFL, I believe. Again, we don't have all the language. We don't know how all this is going to operate, but some of this language is essentially trying to modernize and streamline the current 4473 process. Also within some of these 4473 changes includes kind of the ATF's current attempt to roll back kind of the Biden era zero tolerance rules, going after FFLs for minor paperwork issues. So they're going to try to roll back a lot of that and make it not so burdensome on FFLs in this paperwork and some of these minor errors and them losing their FFL license just because of those errors, and really going back against that Biden era zero tolerance rules, which were so aggressive and they were really trying to shut down a lot of gun stores. Now, another thing that was included in the 4473s that I thought was interesting and I just wanted to point out, which is probably going to get a lot of attention and really probably make a lot of liberal gun owners mad, make a lot of liberals and anti-gun groups very mad, and that is the biological, requirement, the sex requirement for these forms. The ATF is proposing that individuals must list their biological sex on these FFL forms. So their language refers to essentially the immutable biological classification and does not include gender identity. So like I said, this change no doubt will get a lot of attention from anti-gun groups and liberals because of that language that they're adding in there, where you have to identify your biological sex. Now, the next thing involving kind of 4473s and some of this language is the straw purchase language and the clarification of enforcement. The ATF is kind of doubling down on the straw purchaser language, and they're trying to clarify this a little bit more. They define it as hiding the identity of the actual purchaser to circumvent background checks. So that is kind of some of the clarity that they want to add there. But importantly, they're also clarifying what is not a straw purchaser. So here they're going to try to clarify more expressly what is a straw purchase, what type of transactions or what type of, activity falls within that language. So they're going to try to clarify that more expressly. Now, moving on to another section, which I think is going to impact a lot of people and maybe is going to draw a lot of attention, is kind of the NFA changes here, the transportation changes and some of the notification changes that are included in here. This is kind of a massive quality of life improvement for NFA owners. Right now, if you want to transport an NFA item across state lines, you typically need approval in advance. Now, that is going to change under this proposed rule. So here's the key language that they included here. Again, this is the summary section, so this is not the actual text yet. Right now, we don't have that. Essentially, it says that individuals transporting NFA firearms for short-term purposes would no longer be required to submit advance notice or wait approval. So that's also very important, because what that means is there's no longer going to be any waiting for ATF approval for these short-term travel of NFA items. You can travel with NFA items more freely. These long-term moves still require notice, but essentially there's no approval delays. Even if you're going to submit that, you can still essentially move without having to first get the approval. And also, I believe the short-term purpose language is tied expressly to anything less than 365 days. So anything less than a year, you don't need this approval to transport these NFA items. So again, that is just a high-level quick summary of some of the things that are included in the 34 proposed and final rules that the ATF introduced today. Again, we just have a lot of the summary sections and the various groups that they're introducing these rules in. We don't have the express language yet. Those are going to roll out, and we're going to have to break those down a little bit more comprehensively to see if these summaries actually align with some of the language in them. But that should give you a good taste of some of the things that are included by the ATF today. So when you take a step back and look at all of these kind of together, it's very interesting. Essentially, the ATF is walking back rules that they lost in the courtrooms. They're fixing rules that essentially weren't working at all. They're going to try to modernize some of these outdated processes and some of the 4473 issues. And then they're also going to tighten and clarify some key enforcement areas. So there's a lot going on with these proposed and finalized rules. Now, again, as of filming this, we only have the summary of these rules, and I didn't cover all of the various proposals. So as we get more of the language and as I dig deeper into some of these, I will update you guys on all of this. And with a lot of these, there's also going to be some notice and comment periods. So there's going to be comment periods where we can, digest these a little bit more and then issue and submit our comments on if we like these, if we don't like these. So that's another process that's going to happen going forward. I also think it's important to note that they did mention during the announcement that this is not all that they're going to be doing. They anticipate more things will be introduced, as time goes on. And they expressly also mentioned that they're working on updating language on which rifles are specifically used for sporting purposes. And so no doubt that's going to be interesting to a lot of people to see, what happens with that. But that is also something expressly that they mentioned that will be coming. So as we get the actual language of these new rules, I will break them down more comprehensively, but those are kind of some of the main takeaways from what happened today with this announcement from the ATF. So if you have any questions or anything stuck out to you, let me know down in the comment section and maybe I can break those down more comprehensively. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to like, comment, and subscribe. All of those things help to fuel the algorithm and just tells the algorithm that you appreciate this content, and so it shares it with more people. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.